For short, we'll be looking at the World International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, which is really a major topic for discussion right there. And joining us this morning is a veteran journalist and also a public affairs analyst, no other person than Alpha Jackson. It's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Well, Tolu, thank you so much for having me. I'm truly honored to be here. So much has indeed changed, from where we used to be. So it's lovely. I'm happy being here this morning.
It's so good to have you right there. And when we take a look at what has transpired over the years, especially the environment that we have put into consideration a case study of Nigeria, do you think the environment has been enabling enough for journalists to carry out their task?
Well, for everything that is international, we also must give it its local flair.
Yeah.
Have the journalists in Nigeria fared so well? To a large extent, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Why? Because looking at where we are coming from, in the dark days of military rule compared to where we are today, I think we have done fairly well. But it's not to say it's uhuru. The bottom line is that there's always room for improvement. And this improvement starts with the individual journalist as a person, media owners, regulators, and the state, as it were.
Yeah, looking at some of the things you mentioned right there, to a certain extent, journalism has fared a little bit okay, but we are talking about ending impunity against journalists. How has it been in the process of carrying out our jobs?
Well, as you know, it's a very important topic for the United Nations as the global body to reach out to its member states to make them realize that, look, journalists must be given peace. Journalists must be given the enabling environment to carry out their jobs unmolested. That is why about 10 years ago, this came into sharp focus. And I can assure you that subsequent Secretary Generals of the UN have made this, something that the world needs to understand. The bottom line is that if you go to work, you are expected to go back to your family.
Yeah.
Journalists, no doubt, are the source of conscience when it comes to societal transformation. When it comes to issues that bother on human rights, the journalist is usually at, the front lines. When it comes to issues of reporting conflict, the journalist is usually there. When you talk about first responders, the journalist is usually there. But why should anybody get killed? Why should anybody be maimed? Why should anybody be kidnapped? Why should anybody be injured? Not be the case. The world needs to see journalists as a partner in progress. Non-political actors, political actors, the state, individual, give that noble profession its pride of place. But as I did mention in my earlier, we need to come to the realization that it all also ends with the journalist. You must give your job its pride of place. It's not business, it's a profession.
Interesting. You hit your point right there. It's not business, it's a profession. But in the process of carrying jobs, looking at some of the things that we have to face, and we have had instances where journalists have been killed in the process of, especially when you put into consideration our crimes, where some political actors see journalists as a threat.
Well,
How do you correlate this?
Why do they see journalists as a threat? Because they are simply not doing the right thing. But beyond that, you see, anytime there is a conflict, as a head of news, you need to watch who you send out there to go and cover that conflict. I have been around media organizations at managerial level. I can tell you, anytime there is any conflict that I know can potentially lead to any form of injury, and in some cases, worst case scenario, I go myself. I don't send younger colleagues because I'm sure in most instances, no. Now, when these kids or colleagues probably get maimed, get killed, and what have you, what happens? And hence, regulators, media organizations, the journalists themselves must give credence to self-preservation. How do I mean? I'll give you an example. During the NSAS conflict in Lagos, you and I know the controversy that is still surrounding what happened. There's a particular TV station. I was watching their show, and there was this guy who was out there reporting out there on the Tolu. This guy had no helmet. They had no press insignia. He was just there. There were guns. There were cutlasses. There were machetes. There were all manner of things. I had to call the president of the NUJ. I said, Oga Chris, tune to so-so station. Tell me, see what is going on. What do you make about it? Immediately I called him. I also called the then chairman of the NUJ, Abuja Council. I said, sir, this boy is in harm's way. Yes, the news needs to be reported, but he needs to leave to report the news. He should not become the news. I'm happy, barely 2 hours later, there was a press release from the national NUJ and from the state NUJ urging stations to please put the safety of their staff on the front burner. To answer your question, we need to be very circumspect when it comes to how we deal with journalists, when it comes to how we deal with
and probably a major author sees journalists as a treasure.
Of course, they are members of the fourth estate of the realm. There is no government around the world that can take journalists for granted, more so those that are doing their jobs from a professional standpoint. There will always be mistakes. There will always be room for controversy. There will always be room for disagreement. But when we disagree, we just should also learn how to agree and move forward. Journalism is all about development. When you are a journalist and you have development as your mainstay, I can assure you, you will go far. Because what you are doing is that you have become a pinnacle where society can be developed through you. You ask questions, you hold the powerful to account, you make sure that budgets are implemented the way they are supposed to be implemented, because once a president assents to a budget, it becomes law. So can we see that we give credence to the rule of law? In all democracies, journalists are usually at the vanguard of such measures.
How will NUJ come into to address this issue that's a source of worry?
Thank you very much for this question. I find this central. I find it as the fulcrum to what is going on. You remember in my earlier remarks, I made mention of the fact that it's a profession, it's not a business. Now, if you want to be a businessman, go to Wuse Market, go to Ladipo, go to probably Utako Market or something. But if you want to be a journalist, find yourself somewhere in a newsroom, find yourself somewhere in a studio like this, and make sure that you give professionalism its pride of place. If you see what is going on, blackmail seems to be, we need to self-circumspect. Blackmail seems to be the order of the day. But the whole idea is that whatever you get at the long run, have yourself to... You see, the thing is that if you try to blackmail someone who has nothing to fear, the courts are there. But sadly, I can assure you that people have been maimed. People have probably lost their lives. Why? Because they try to strive on blackmails. Because the other person will also want to hit you back. Never be under the illusion that, all right, yes, I can do this and always get away with it. But again, can we go back to the fulcrum? Can we go back to where this whole thing should have started from? There's no greater impunity because, as I did mention, internationally, we are looking at how can we stop crimes against journalists. But I can tell you one of the biggest crimes against journalists is the fact that a lot of media organizations don't pay. If you are owing people 7 months' salary, you are owing people 10, you are owing people 21 months' salary, these people come to work. These people have families. They have to cater for their families. They may need to pay rent, they may need to buy fuel, they may need to pay medical bills, they may need to pay school fees and what have you. How do they survive? This is where regulation comes in. I will want to use this opportunity on a day like this to call on the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria through the National Broadcasting Commission, you know. Can we empower the commission to, if anybody is not paying his staff and does not have a tangible reason for saying, shut down such a station? We need to, whether we like it or not,
sanitize the system.
Sanitize the system. You talked about the NUJ. The MUJ is somewhat hamstrung. There are lots of quacks out there. The whole idea is that how can the NUJ sanitize? We have chapels. We should be able to identify one, and we should also be identifying those that are not a part of us. It's sad that you go for assignments and then you see people that you know are just there. You know why they are there. They are pecuniary reasons. Those that are doing the main job often are just there in the crowd. Hence, the NUJ used to do something where they used to, not pilfer, what's that word now? Where they used to go around, you know, assignments to see who belongs to them and who does not. We may need to bring that back. The NUJ need to have a database of its members. The NUJ need to see that training becomes a part of our daily lives, because there's always room for improvement. And the only way this improvement can come is if we train and retrain and retrain and retrain. Best practices are forever expanding. It's not a static thing. And hence, you know, the NUJ has a role to play, the media organizations have a role to play, the media owners have a role to play, government has a role to play. The bottom line is we need to sanitize them.
Talking about sanitizing the system, because that puts us in a very, when you are talking about sanitizing the system, a whole lot of factors must come into play. How do you be able to set the benchmark for the people that can be coming? Because there are some basic requirements that are before they come in. But these days, you have so many mushroom people springing up here and there as journalists on Facebook and so many, and online mediums.
Well, you see, the online issue is another issue. You understand? The thing here is that we can kind of pay a lot of attention to the traditional media. Of course, the print, the electronic, the radio, you know, the TV, as it were. But you know, the online thing is another thing. Once upon a time in Nigeria, everybody became a blogger. Why? Because certain bloggers probably made so much money and people could. And then, you know, we have a way of, okay, if this person can do it, let me give it a try. Who knows? And then you get people that are untrained. You get people that know very little about the profession, going in just because you have line on space, you know, online, and then before you know it, people are just circulating information that should be censored, information that should be managed. You see, there is something called information management. Information is something you must manage, because any information you give out that will cause harm, and probably cause offense, why give out such an information? There are informations that whether you like it or not, you need to filter it. You understand? So back to your question, the bottom line is, what will be the benchmark? I have had people try to argue, you must go to a school of journalism, be a graduate of mass communication, and what have you. But I dare say it doesn't have to be the way forward. My first degree is in international relations. My second is in defense and strategic studies. So tell me why, having labored in this vineyard for about 22 years, I will not be a journalist simply because
you don't have a certificate?
I don't have a certificate in journalism. The kind of trainings I have, as it were today, the mass comm graduate, the journalist, does he have that kind of training? I have a privilege of drawing from years. Dr. Gupta on CNN, did he read mass comm? He's a medical doctor. You can be an engineer and be a journalist, because anything that has to do with engineering, anything that has to do with stuff like transfer of technology, innovation, and what have you, will a mass comm graduate write on that topic better than somebody who has a background in what have you? It's not going to be. You understand? So we need to look at these things. I have had this argument over and over again. No, you didn't read mass communication, you don't qualify. You don't have a certificate in journalism, you don't qualify. We need to look at those things, because the benchmark for me is you have a degree. And if you have a degree, I have a friend who is a vet doctor who ended up in the bank. I mean, what an aberration you may call. But the guy did very well for himself in the banking sector. Now, if there is a basic, you can build upon that basic. That is why you went to school anyway. The bottom line is you went to school so that you can ingratiate, so you can make impact in society. If doctors were to remain just in the hospital, if pilots were to remain just on the plane, if lawyers were to remain just in the courtroom, tell me, what will humanity look like today? But we all mix, and then we make life better for each and every of us. Anytime you feel ill, you go see a doctor. Anytime you need a redress, you go see, what do you call it, a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Anytime you need to fly from one point to another, you hop on a plane and the pilot flies you from point A to point B. So that, for me, is my approach when it comes to benchmarking who should be a journalist. All that we need to do is make sure you are passionate about the job, make sure you give credence to nationalism, make sure you give credence to patriotism, make sure you give credence to editorial values, make sure you give credence to etiquette. If you have these virtues in you and you have what it takes, you are not a lazy person. Journalists are not lazy people. Tolu, when did you
I'll be here before 7.
Very good. I used to come into you at 5 a.m. I mean, there were nights I left this place at 1 a.m. 5 a.m. I was back here. Of course, I was a lot younger, but it paid because a lot of experience came through it. Then you thought you were being belabored. You thought, no, this was too much. But looking at it today, I thank God for some of those experiences.
Interesting right there. Talking about going back to memory lane and looking at some of the challenges. One major thing that stand out for me, also the father, when you put into consideration crimes, difficulty of carrying out our task, and when you look at some of the challenges, the economic stations finding difficult to meet up with their responsibility and stuff like that, don't you think it's a time where there should be an insurance policy in partnership with government that will ensure that in case in the line of duty things happen, journalists can be catered for, because we have nothing like that in place for journalists?
It must not always be government.
Okay.
These initiatives can be private sector driven. The insurance companies need to come up with packages for category of persons that are usually first responders. Who are first responders? The military, in extreme cases, the police, medical personnel, journalists. During COVID, when everybody was under some kind of lockdown, you were out working.
And there was no coverage for that.
I mean, was there any kind of coverage for that? Now, we lost a lot of friends, we lost a lot of family members, we lost a lot of prominent Nigerians. A lot of lives went during COVID. Anybody could have been a victim. So the point here is that you don't have to wait for government to initiate this. I mean, I don't see why ITV cannot approach an insurance company and say, what are your packages? Where do we fit in? You see, insurance, as it were, is something that a lot of us don't get close to. But the truth is, because we also don't know that there is some advantage. Not some, there is a lot of advantage if we give credence. If you insure your car, comprehensively, something goes wrong, even if it doesn't take you to, you get something.
Yeah.
Life insurance, in case of workplace hazards, injury, what have you, people have benefited where medical bills have been settled by insurance companies. So it doesn't have to be a government initiative, no. Tolu, all we need to do is, for instance, ITV can approach an insurance company. What are your packages? Where do we come in? Can we insure our staff in case the inevitable happens? In case some kind of injury, you know, befalls a staff in the course of duty, and what have you.
Some people are, some organizations are failed to be able to provide for their staff because they are scared of losing some of their top hands. Do you think that should be a reason not to make that position available?
I will share a thought with you. Anybody that is scared of losing his staff, there's something he's right. Right? Anybody that is scared of losing his staff, there's something he's not doing right. The bottom line is that a lot of media owners think they are doing their staff a favor. Yes. Or a lot of them think they are doing their staff a favor. They will tell you, you can go now. There's no jobs in Nigeria. Where will you go and get another job?
There's only somebody out there.
There's always somebody out there to replace him. I've had those kind of things being bandied around. But they don't realize that. I'll give you an example. Tolu, if you're starting a media organization today, you as the proprietor, one candid advice I'll give you is make sure you keep your staff for the first 5 years. Do all you can to make sure your best hands, you retain them. When we get to that 5 years, make sure you keep them for another 10 years. I can assure you, after 10 years, prisms has been laid. Values have been laid. Anybody coming to that organization 100 years from then will carry on. But I can assure you today, you ship in, you ship out. You ship in, you ship out. How can the center hold? How can the center hold? So the bottom line is, this is management now.
Yeah.
If you manage your staff well, they will stay. If you give them credence, if the work environment is not toxic, why would they want to leave you? But if you think you're doing them favor, you talk down on staff, you denigrate staff, you don't pay staff, you tell staff, my friend, go to hell. Who do you think you are? I'm afraid you will definitely continually have issues.
Okay. Finally, before I let you go, we'll talk about relationship between and government partners. How can we make it better? So the organization sees journalists as partners in progress. We have this where they, okay, we need journalists, but they don't see the importance. And at times when they look at their scale of preference, journalists are supposed to be in their scale. Meanwhile, they need journalists to be put out the information there. How do you better that relationship?
The bottom line is, it's not that they don't need you, because I tell you, I've been an editor, run two outfits. They look for you when there's a problem. They look for you when some kind of damage control needs to be done. So they actually need you. But you know, the bottom line is that you have to make yourself indispensable. By making yourself indispensable, if you are truly professional in your outlay as a journalist, you know the department or agency will want to talk you down. Can we credence to self-preservation? Can we give credence to dignity as far as self and the job is concerned? We give credence to society by being true to society, by reporting facts and not fiction. Can we give credence to society by giving the information that society needs to know and allow the society to interpret same for themselves? You can give me an information, I can decide to use same, I can decide not to use it. Talking about MDAs, I can assure you they need you. No organization, the private organization, that doesn't want to be seen in good light. But of course, when they go, tell them you've gone wrong. Tell them, give them alternatives. You know, it's not all about you criticize from morning till night. No, 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 no. When they get it right, in your editorial, give it to them. But where they get it wrong, tell them that, okay, we think we need to have a redress here. The bottom line is, can we all see ourselves as partners in progress? If we see ourselves from that scene, I can assure you that most of these problems that we get to encounter, most of these challenges will be reduced to, you know, the barest minimum.
But do you think the way we practice journalism in Nigeria, we tend to put ourselves in harm's way?
A lot of times, yes. A lot of times, because you try to blackmail people, right? I can assure you, if you do that, you may not be there for too long to keep on doing what you're doing. That is where we need to deal with quacks. You know, a nationalist, a patriot will not want to blackmail another person just so that he can gain something from saying. You understand? And then I need to tell you, it's not the way we practice journalism in Nigeria. It's the way some bad eggs have entered the system. Journalism in Nigeria is probably the most noble, one of the very best of jobs that you possibly can ever have. I can assure you, anytime you go out there, the newspaper stands, you see newspapers, you see great stories. These things, it's not AI that created those things, human beings that did it, right? Journalism in Nigeria is still being practiced well, but we cannot be unmindful of the fact that we have a few bad eggs that are spoiling the good that those of us who do what we do out of passion are enjoying. So the bottom line is, do we deal with these quacks, and how do we give credence to professionalism? I can assure you, if we do that, society, individuals, government, everybody will be better off. I
must say a big thank you to you, Mr. After Jackson, for joining us this morning and shedding light on the International Day to End Impunity Against Journalism, and now to see how to ensure that Nigerians, journalists in Nigeria continue to practice their job at the topmost level and be able to deliver for the masses to get the right information. I must say thank you to you for joining us.
Once more, thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to take a quick break right now, and when we come back, we'll be looking at other things right there. Not forgetting that Daniel is still standing by, former Benin Network Studio.